Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Calls. This is the 2023 RBC Heritage Data Dive Show. Got a lot to get into. Did some research around the green surfaces, the putting, and all that stuff. And we have a lot of the prior leaderboards to cover. So I don't want to waste any time. Let's get into it. All statistics provided tonight and every night are from fantasynational.com. It is simply the best tool out there for your money. It's going to make you a much smarter gambler, much better DFS player. Go check them out. It's simply well worth your investment. In the description to the video, there are links to all of my social media. This is Twitter and Instagram, where I did post some research today regarding the previous winners here at Harbor Town, going back to 2013. So if you have not seen that, go give me a follow at those two places and you will see the criteria that make up the previous 10 winners here at the RBC Heritage. Twitter is also where I post my betting cards week after week on the PGA Tour. So if you're interested in seeing my betting cards, then give me a follow over at Twitter. Twitter is also where I am doing my daily 3 up, 3 down for baseball. 3 players that I think will accrue their pricing in DFS baseball. 3 players that I don't. Last that I checked before setting up the show this evening, I was having a pretty good evening. So if you are interested in some quick hitting daily baseball content, give me a follow over at Twitter as well. The link to my Twitch channel is also below. This is where I do all of my in-depth research. It's much more laid back, listening to some music in the background, but I get pretty data intensive with all of my research. I also do some gaming over there and a few other things. So if you are interested in that content, give me a follow over at Twitch. And then finally, we're live. Chat is open. Would love to hear from you all. When the odds came out this morning, did you fire off any wagers? I certainly did. What do you think of the players that have withdrawn? There are a few more withdrawals that we have to talk about. If you have done research today, who are you been focusing on, or what statistic have you been focused on? All of that good stuff. So jump into chat and let me know what you've been thinking for the RBC Heritage. So I am going to be doing the same. So let's dig into the weeds of the data for the 2023 RBC Heritage. And we're going to start over at Windfinder as promised last night. Thursday and Friday looks like there could be a little bit of wind in the forecast early on this week. Especially Thursday, looks like the wind would pick up, or is looking to pick up in the afternoon. Friday looks like it's going to be pretty wet, a little bit chillier, but nothing to the effect that we had at Augusta this past week. But there you go. There is a look at the wind and forecast in general leading up to the RBC Heritage this week. And of course, we will update this Wednesday evening at the beginning of the DFS Tactics show. So I wanted to give you a look at that information for your research as you move forward this week. We're going to move to Fantasy National, and you can see that I went ahead and grabbed all of the courses that have Poa Trivialis listed as their overseed when the PGA Tour comes to that destination. After doing some research today, I am feeling pretty confident that these are going to play true to Poa Trivialis instead of the regular Bermuda that I had been thinking or holding out to see from last night. So I'm going to start the show with that, as it is really the only metric that we have to look at for these courses. So since the beginning of 2021, your top putters on Poa Trivialis Overseed, and those courses are Innisbrook, which is the Valspar, the Stadium course, which is the American Express. Now, all of those greens out there are listed as Poa Trivialis, but we only get the statistics for the stadium course. That's the only course that has shot link. So that's the American Express, the final round, and then one of the 3 rounds for the cut. TPC San Antonio at the Valero the week before the Masters. TPC Sawgrass, the Players. And then finally TPC Scottsdale, the Waste Management Phoenix Open. Those are your courses that have Poa Trivialis listed as the green surface, or at least Poa Trivialis Overseed listed as the green surface. Your top putters on that surface, going back to 2021, the start of 2021, are Sam Burns, Brian Harmon, Taylor Montgomery, Troy Merritt, Chesson Hadley, JT Poston, Adam Hadwin, Matt Kuchar, Sam Ryder, and Minwoo Lee. And before we get too much further into it, 3 more field changes that I have seen today. I last checked late afternoon or so there might be a few more. The biggest news probably in golf today, Will Zalatoris is done for the year. He had a second procedure done on his shoulder, so Will Zalatoris will not be playing in competitive golf anytime soon. So he is the second field change. Jason Day and Rory McIlroy are the other 2 field changers, the other 2 names that have withdrawn that I've seen from earlier today, bringing the total players withdrawing down to, or up to 4. Alex Noren, we mentioned last night, but Alex Noren, Will Zalatoris, Rory McIlroy, and Jason Day. But there's a look at your top putters on Poa Trivialis, and as I was mentioning last night, Kuchar, who loves this event, very, very good in general on Poa Trivialis. JT Poston, someone who also really likes short courses. He did well at the match play, which is statistics that we don't get, but Kuchar made it out of his pod. Poston made it out of his pod. Taylor Montgomery gave Spieth a run for his money. Brian Harmon, usually really good in match play. Sam Burns, your winner at the match play. So another tournament that you could look at in terms for putting, if you are able to find those putting statistics, would be the match play. But a lot of success here with Poa Trivialis as well, as you see. All right, now I am going to kind of reset this as much as I can. Let's start looking at a couple of filters that we saw last night, and we'll do it again tonight for a quick refresher. Let's take a look at some Pete Dye courses. This was absolutely one of the criteria that I put forward over on social media, having to do with success at Pete Dye Designs. So since the beginning of 2021, your top performers on Pete Dye courses: Shane Lowry, Sung Jae, Corey Connors, Brian Harmon, Scotty Scheffler, Patrick Cantley, Victor Hovland, Terrell Hatton, Colin Morikawa, and Tony Finau. And just for your information, or for your knowledge, the courses that are being gathered in this data set, these Pete Dye Designs, of course, Harbour Town, Kiowa, which was the 2021 PGA Championship, Stadium Course, the American Express, TPC Louisiana, and even though it's going to have no factor on the rankings since we only went back to 2021, TPC Louisiana is the host of the Zurich Classic. The Zurich Classic used to be an individual stroke play event, changed to a team format in 2017. But if you want to look at historical data, Zurich Classic absolutely is a Pete Dye design. TPC River Highlands, TPC Sawgrass, the Players, and then Whistling Straits, most famously, at least recently, for the Ryder Cup. But there's a look at your Pete Dye designs on the PGA Tour consistently, or at least in the previous X amount of years, probably back to 2015 or so. Let's see, I don't think I did, yeah, we just did Pete Dye design, so that should be the same. We're also going to look at short courses. Now, on the GCSA tournament fact sheet, it is listed at 7,191 yards. It's a little bit on the longer end, but they have added a few tees in the past couple of years that have lengthened a couple of the holes. So while it will play close to 7,200, it is still a shorter course. So your top performers on short courses since the start of 2021: Patrick Cantlay, Seamus Power, Russell Henley, Xander Schauffele, Sungjae, Corey Connors, Victor Hovland, Chris Kirk, Siwoo Kim, and Tony Finau. So a lot of overlap here with short courses and with Pete Dye success. Cantlay was up there. Sungjae, Corey Connors, I know, was top 10 in both. Shane Lowry was number 1 for Pete Dye courses. He's 11th in short courses. Tony Finau, I believe, was top 10 in both. I think Hovland might have been as well. So a lot of overlap between short courses and Pete Dye. Not going to do anything with scoring filter. Not easy, not difficult. Generally plays to average, and the wind looks like it could die down. At least Saturday looks, really, really good. So it's not going to be windy all week long. So I don't feel comfortable doing anything with scoring filter. We looked at greens, the Poa Trivialis, and of course didn't do anything with speed, as they have kind of oscillated between average and fast the past 4 or so years. So we're going to bring this timeline back in, or narrow it a little bit, to the beginning of this year. We're going to look at a couple of different things. We did not look at off the tee last night when we went to Microsoft Excel, and admittedly, on my end, I was a little surprised that the data was showing that off the tee was more important than I was giving it credit to. So your top off the tee players since the start of this calendar year, meaning the past 4+ months. Top off the tee players: Scotty Scheffler, Luke List, Keith Mitchell, Hayden Buckley, Patrick Cantlay, Gary Woodland, Cameron Young, Victor Hovland, Tyrrell Hatton, and Corey Connors. There are 2 players in that top 10 that are also top 10 in approach. Scotty Scheffler and Tyrrell Hatton are top 10 in both off the tee and in strokes gained approach. That's why they are first and tied for second in strokes gained ball striking. But I also want to look at some around the green as well. Around the green, I believe, is going to be a decent factor. Especially these greens are some of the smallest on tour. They rival Pebble Beach in terms of size and the lack thereof. So your top around the green players, again with no filters, no scoring, you might, it would probably be okay to look at around the green on Poa Trivialis, those 5 courses. Not going to do that, as scrambling isn't very difficult here. The rough generally is short, so I just think it's going to be around the green in general. Your top around the green players this calendar year: Justin Thomas, Jimmy Walker, Justin Thomas, Jimmy Walker, Ben Griffin, Chris Kirk, Patrick Rogers, Zach Blair, Jordan Spieth, Brendan Todd, Adam Schenk, Matt Kuchar, Tommy Fleetwood, and Danny Willett. Skipping Jason Day, he has withdrawn. So there's a look at your some strokes gained, at least the umbrella stats, or the big 4, if you will, off the tee, approach, around the green, putting, of the players in the field this week at the RBC Heritage. Let's go ahead and start looking into some of these prior leaderboards and get a feel for the metrics that really lend credence, I should say, to upper end success. So looking at last year's leaderboard, we will highlight, let's just do the top 20. Just convenient for ties here. So you see off the tee, really only 2 players were vastly negative. You had 2 players that were very, very close to field average. The approach, kind of the same. You had more players negative in terms of the approach. Around the green, a little bit more hit and miss, but the putting really dominated for your upper end success. And again, on that surface, JT Poston, always good. Kuchar, always good. Corey Connors, I believe, is highly rated on Poa Trivialis. Let's see, trying to look at some other names here that might jump out. Lowry on Pete Dye Designs. Patrick Cantley on Pete Dye Designs. So you can see a whole lot of this overlap here. If we sort on these individual statistics, your winner was 4th off the tee, very close to leading the category. Some decent amount of success here. You do have some middling finishes from Lucas Glover and Joseph Brandlett, but some decent amount of success here. 4.6, you have an 8.7. About the same amount of success, a little bit more in the top end. Your podium finishes, your top fives, but you also have a clunker of a made cut from Brian Stewart, C.T. Pan. So I would classify it as probably about the same, a little bit less or a little bit more top heavy on the strokes gain approach, but about the same. Around the green, 5.6. So still its upper number was more than off the tee, but you do have a missed cut very high from Wesley Bryan. Danny Willett's a clunker of a made cut, but you have some elite finishes here too. So I still think around the green is going to have a pretty big impact. And then putting, 8.2, and much, much more correlating in terms of success of the 4. Not going to go to 2021 in terms of strokes gained. Let's just go ahead and jump into some specific page views here. Start with driving. We're going to look at some driving distance, greens, all that good stuff. So last year, your winner was negative. However, you had a pretty good run of positive driving distance last year, which is a little surprising because distance is not a big factor at Harbor Town. So a few players negative, but overall it was a decent performing metric, I would say, for the players that were in the top 20. Greens, you had one player that was more than negative a half. Troy Merritt just did not hit a lot of greens last year. Everyone else was a negative 0.4 in terms of greens gained. Again, backing up my initial thought last night that greens are going to be a pretty big factor this week. In fact, good drives is a pretty big deal. Matt Kuchar was very poor in good drives gained last year, but everybody else that was negative negative 0.2. So interesting to see that. Let's take a look at 2021. Fairways and greens. Again, surprisingly, the top, 11 of the top 12 were positive in distance. So, okay, maybe a little bit more credence to distance, or maybe it has shown that distance is gaining in terms of importance in recent years. We've seen some metrics, or we saw some metrics last night that followed a pattern, were either fairly important 4 to 5 years ago and then started to fall off, or the inverse where they've gained in importance the past couple of years. Perhaps distance is one of those. A lot of success here. Only, again, of the top 17, again, just for ties, only one player horrendously poor in greens was Brian Harmon. Everybody else is pretty decent. Okay. Let's sort on some of these. Okay, so this kind of backs up what I was feeling on the distance. Now, your top distance performers, 2 missed cuts and a clunker of a made cut. Now, your winner in 2021 was 4th in terms of distance, but not a whole lot of correlation beyond that, of your top distance players. If we look at greens, your winner led or tied for the lead in greens in regulation. Imagine he's probably pretty high in good drives gained. So again, it's leading me to believe that greens in regulation are the biggest factor from this tab or this page view. We'll take a look at 2022 again and sort on the statistics. Yeah, again, I mean, a little bit more correlating since you had some top 5 finishes up here, but then you have a very, big run of missed cuts. You got a clunker, 2 clunkers of made cuts up here, so just don't feel distance is a huge factor. Good drives. Again, middling to clunker finishes. Your winner was probably top 17 or so, top 20, so not terrible. Greens, yeah, okay. Much higher. Your winner was much higher. You do have a couple of clunker made cuts in here as well, Henrik Stenson and Jim Herman, but still feel like greens is the more correlating upper leaderboard success than good drives gained. Yeah. Chris Kirk's miscut rises a little bit on the greens, but consistently just better performances from your top greens and regulation gained players. So, moving to this year's field and the fairways and greens page view, we'll take a look at this a couple of different ways, but just in general, no filters, just since the start of this calendar year, your top greens in regulation gained players in the field this week: Scotty Scheffler, John Rahm, Tyler Duncan, Aaron Rai, Patrick Cantlay, Gary Woodland, Tony Finau, Stefan Jaeger, Luke List, and Will Gordon. I think it would be alright to use greens on short courses, and I'm going to have to expand the timeline for that. So, on short courses, your top greens in regulation gained players have been Russell Knox, Colin Morikawa, Luke List, Corey Connors, Scotty Scheffler, Matthew Neesmith, Russell Henley, Adam Svensson, JJ Spawn, Taylor Pendrith, Tony Finau, Victor Hovland, and Patrick Cantlay. When I say your top greens regulation game performers on short courses, this is dating back to 2021. So, not sure if I'm going to use the short course filter for the greens. I probably will for my mixed condition model. But that gave you a look in both regards on short courses and in general or recency. And the reason why I'm not going to be looking too much at scrambling, we looked at this a little bit last night, but as a reminder, the scrambling percentage here much higher. So players are able to scramble much more successfully here than they are at the average tour event. That's why I don't think the scrambling is going to be what we want to look at. I think it's just going to be around the green. So I'll keep the course breakdown up. But let's go ahead and move to birdies and bogeys. And last night I had a little bit of a conversation with myself and with you all on whether we think it's going to be the birdies, whether it's the bogeys, or maybe it's the double bogeys. We saw in Microsoft Excel double bogey avoidance looked to be fairly important. So let's see if we can gain some insight in the past couple of years of a leaderboard. From last year, our winner was much more in the bogey avoidance and also in the double avoidance. You did have a few eagles, but you can see eagles are pretty rare here, and they don't typically lead to too much in terms of success. So I'm not going to be looking at anything with eagles. Instead, look at the consistency of the bogeys avoided. No one in the top 20 last year was negative in terms of bogey avoidance. Now, we only had 4 negative in terms of birdies gained, and really only one of those was far back in the birdies gained. Everyone else was negative 0.2. So, really, I would almost classify just one player was negative in birdies gained. But facts are what they are. Everybody in the top 20, in fact, everybody in the top 25 was positive in bogey avoidance. So interesting to note that. We'll sort on these. Now the highest numbers are going to be coming in this birdies gained. Now your winner, not up here. Again, he was negative, but some very, very solid correlating success with these birdies gained. And this might be something like we saw at the Masters where bogey avoidance is the more consistent metric, but your birdies gained led to the higher finishes or the more upper end or upper echelon finishes. Bogey avoidance 6.4, and yeah, you can see again, look at the just sheer number of top 15s here in the bogey or in the birdies gained. In fact, what is this? 3, 6, 9, the top 12 players roughly in terms of birdies gained. No one finished outside the top 15. If we expand this to include all that, only one player was outside the top 30 of your top 16 performers in birdies gained. So again, leading credence to the fact that this might be your elite level finishes, your higher ceiling players, but your consistent performers are in the bogey avoidance. You actually do have a miscut somewhat high up here with Cam Smith. And it's not to say that bogey avoidance wasn't correlating at all. You do have a lot of good finishes here, but clearly the birdies gained was more in 2022. Let's take a look at 2021, see what we can see from there. All right, so in the top 17, every single player was positive in birdies and bogeys. The birdies gained was the more correlating, or was the more indicative in 2021, as nobody was negative in birdies gained. 6.1 being the highest. But again, a lot of your top 10s, top 15s up here. Whereas the bogey avoidance, okay, so the higher number is actually in the bogey avoidance this year. Oh my, so that's very strong there, but then you're coming to 2 missed cuts. So the 2 years look like they have swapped. Last year, 2022, the birdies gained was the more upper echelon finishes. Your more consistent performers were in the bogey avoidance. In 2021, that's the opposite. The birdies gained was your more consistent performers. Bogey avoidance was your upper echelon. Interesting to see that. Let's take a look at doubles just very quickly. Not a big number here. Not a big number there. 2022. Yeah, just 1.3. So don't know how much, looking at these prior leaderboards, how much double bogey avoidance is going to matter. But I think it's going to be safe to say that we'll want to look at both birdies and bogeys. And as of early on a Monday evening, I don't know which way I am leaning. So I'm just going to look at birdies and bogeys in lots of different ways. So we have the short course filter on. So let's go ahead and start there. Your top birdies gained players, and I'm only going to be looking at birdies gained because eagles are pretty darn rare here at Harbor Town. So I'm just going to be looking at birdies gained in that regard. Your top birdies gained players on short courses since the start of 2021. You have Patrick Cantlay, Seamus Power, Cameron Young, Stuart Sink, Tony Finau, Cam Davis, Victor Hovland, Max Homa, Taylor Montgomery, and Russell Henley. Of these players, or of these 10, only 2 are top 10 in bogey avoidance as well, Seamus Power and Russell Henley. Your top bogey avoiders on short courses, Sung Jae, Siwoo Kim, Seamus Power, Russell Henley, Scotty Scheffler, Brian Harmon, Matt Kuchar, Chris Kirk, Matt Fitzpatrick, and JJ Spawn. So there's your top 10 in both birdies gained and bogeys avoided on short courses. Let's take a look at it on Pete Dye courses. Again, players that tend to play one Pete Dye course tend to play a lot of the same Pete Dye courses very, very well. So on Pete Dye courses since the start of 2021, Your top birdies gained players: Tony Finau, Patrick Cantlay, Eric Van Rooyen. First time I think we've said him tonight. Terrell Hatton, Siwoo Kim, Shane Lowry, Tommy Fleetwood, Scotty Scheffler, Cam Davis, and Max Homa. Of these 10, again, only 2 are positive, or 2 are top 10 in bogey avoidance as well. Tommy Fleetwood and Scotty Scheffler. Your top bogey avoiders on Pete Dye courses: Sung Jae, Brian Harmon, Corey Connors, Scotty Scheffler, Victor Hovland, Keegan Bradley, Doug Ghim, first time we've said him tonight, Justin Thomas, I think that might be the first time we've said him tonight, Tommy Fleetwood, JT Poston, and Billy Horschel. So there's a look at birdies gained and bogeys avoided on a couple of different filters, Pete Dye and short course. If anything, I'm leaning towards using short course for this filter, but perhaps Pete Dye would be a useful filter on birdies gained or bogeys avoided. So put it in the comments. I would be curious to hear from the community. Put it in the comments. How do you think the mixed condition model should be made? Do you think it should be birdies gained? Should it be bogeys avoided? What filter? Should it just be no filter and just see who's been the best birdies gained or bogeys avoided player recently? You can also make that argument. So would be interested to hear from you all in that regard. Put it in the comments. But that's a look at the scoring tab in Fantasy National. Let's go ahead and look at proximity very, very quickly. We saw last night that the 175 to 200, at least in terms of raw data, raw metrics, 175 to 200 was the most important range. Of the players that finished in the top 20, really only had 2 that were really, really poor in that range. JT Poston was not good, and Matt Kuchar just generally doesn't play that range well at all, at least here at Harbortown. We saw that in the early look file, and we'll see that again tonight when we go to Microsoft Excel. But really, otherwise, all of these players are, slightly under field average, but not by much. If we sort, you've got okay amount of correlation, I guess. Nothing that stands out per se. 2021 proximity, and this is an outlier year, I will tell you, and it's supposed to be a low outlier year, but look at this. Of the top 17, 2 really were only in the negatives by a good amount. Brian Harmon was very poor at that range. Shane Lowry was negative 2.1 from this distance across 4 rounds. That's pretty much essentially field average. And then Corey Connors was a fair amount into the negatives, but only 3 negative from 175 to 200. If we sort on it, more upper end leaderboard success. Stuart Sink was 4th in that range. You do have a couple of missed cuts that climb pretty high, but again, a top 15, winner, runner-up, top 10, top 10. So most of your approach shots here at Harbortown are going to come from 175 to 200, and it has been the most correlating across the years. And we'll go back to last year's just to get a look. So your top performers on approach shots, 175 to 200 yards. No filters, just bringing this timeline in to the start of this calendar year. Good evening, Joanne. Thanks for jumping in chat again. Good to see you. Have you made any wagers? If so, how are you feeling with them? Who'd you bet? What are you looking for in terms of statistics for moving forward this week in your analysis for the RBC Heritage? And If you haven't seen, 3 more field changes this week. Rory McIlroy has withdrawn, Jason Day has withdrawn, and the biggest news, Will Zalatoris had surgery over the weekend. He is done for the year. So no competitive golf for Will Zalatoris the rest of this year. But 3 more field changes in addition to Alex Noren that we mentioned last night. But your top approach players or proximity players from 175 to 200 yards: Taylor Pendrith, Ches Reavie, Keegan Bradley, Christian Bezadenhout, Trey Mullinax, JJ Spawn, John Rahm, Nate Lashley, Siwoo Kim, and Scott Stallings. Again, the majority of our approach shots come from 175 to 200. It is the most important range here. Last year didn't look like it was all that important. 2021 was supposedly an outlier year, and it was very important. So take that for what you will. But I think it does say something that 175 to 200 is the most important approach length. And just on cue, we're going to move to par 3s, and the majority of the par 3s here are, in between 190 and 200 yards. All 4 par 3s measure above 190. So last year, Jordan Spieth didn't play the par 3s particularly well at all. You had, 4 players negative? Now, a few more were negative in the 175 to 200, but, negative a tenth, negative. Really only 1 player was bad from that range. It was Joaquin Niemann. If we sort, a decent amount of correlation, but nothing spectacular by any means. Again, just re-emphasizing the par 3s tend to be a little bit mitigated in importance here. 6.2, and you see 5.9 of that came in the 175 to 200s. So 150 to 175, only a 2.1. 200 to 225, only a 1.3. So it is just the 175 to 200 par 3s that we want to look at if we're going to put a lot of emphasis into par 3s. Not sure we're going to. Now, 2022 didn't lead to a whole lot of success. In 2021, Stewart Cink played very well on par 3s. Only 1 player was negative in the top 17 on par 3s. You can see Stewart Cink played that length of par 3 very, very well. In fact, Stewart Cink, was the co-leader in total par 3 performance, and also the co-leader in 175 to 200, and much more correlating success in 2021, as you can see here. You had a 5, a 2, and a 1.3. So hopefully through the 2 previous years you see that the 175 to 200 is just the most important range and the most important correlating to success. So since the start of this calendar year, your top performers on par 3s, 175 to 200 yards in the field this week: Sam Burns, Sung Jae, Ben Taylor, Kurt Kitayama, Lucas Glover, Justin Suh, Doug Gim, Ricky Fowler, Peter Malnati, and Denny McCarthy. Interesting that it's not a whole lot of overlap between the par 3s and the approach or proximity from 175 to 200. It's always interesting to see that, but not a lot of overlap. In fact, I don't really recognize any of these names except for maybe Sung Jae from 175 to 200. I'm going to have to cheat, but I am, now that I'm thinking about it, Pendrith, Reavie, Spawn. Okay, Siwoo Kim is top 10 in both, but Sung Jae's not even top 10 in terms of proximity 175 to 200. So again, here's your proximity 175 to 200, and here's your par 3s from 175 to 200. So no overlap there. Taylor Pendrith is close. Number 1 in 175 to 200 proximity, 12th in the par 3s 175 to 200. John Rahm's also very high, but not top 10 in both. JJ Spawn's also very high, but not top 10 in both. So There you go. All right. Prepare this for the par fours. Par fours are just a astronomically important part of Harbor Town. You can see nobody in the top 25 was negative in terms of par fours. It's just an important factor. Third, first, second, third. It's pretty darn straightforward there. The 400 to 450 is supposedly the most important length. You do have 3 players that are negative, but of your players that finished in the top 15 or so, actually top 10, only 1 was negative. By far the most important in that regard. You have a 3.8, a 6, a 5.5. Now, the 455, you do have miscut pretty high up here from KH Lee. You had a couple of clunker made cuts, Lahiri and Schwab. Whereas in the 400, 450, you might not have the dominant top end, although your winner is still up here. You might not have the dominant top end, the first, third, second, third in order or whatever. But you don't have a miscut for quite a while. And in fact, you don't really have any clunker made cuts for quite a while either. So the 400 to 450 is the most important range, or at least it was last year. 2.6 is still somewhat fairly high, but I don't want to put a whole lot of emphasis into that. If we look at 2021 and par fours, again, you'll see that of the players that finished in the top 24, nobody was negative in par fours. Most important range, again, only 2 were negative in 400 to 450s. Webb Simpson was so darn close to field average that it's just getting rounded to 0, but it is technically slightly under. And then Charles Howe was a -2. So again, a lot of emphasis on par fours and the 400 450 if we sort on them. Second, fourth. Sung Jae sneaks in there as a 13th. He's quite the outlier, clearly. 13th. And then your winner. 2.7, 2.8, a 6.0. A little bit less in terms of correlation than in 2022, because you do have a miscut from Ben on, but again, a lot of your very good performers here. Will Zalatoris was a middling finish, sure. Chase Seifert was a middling finish, but top 20, top 15, top 10, runner-up. Lots of success here. And then the 455 is a 5.1. And again, pretty high miscut from Cantley, but you have some good success here. So these 2 links are clearly the most important. I am still sticking with my assumption from last night, or my saying from last night, that I truly believe it's the 400, 450 that are the most important range. So, of the players in the field this week at the RBC Heritage, your top par 4 performers: Scotty Scheffler, Chris Kirk, Max Homa, Tony Finau, John Rahm, Akshay Bhatia, Patrick Cantley, Taylor Moore, Colin Morikawa, Ben Martin, Nick Taylor, and Victor Hovland. Again, skipping Jason Day, he is withdrawn. And then of the specific length here at Harbor Town: John Rahm, Taylor Montgomery, Colin Morikawa, Tony Finau, Cameron Young, Jordan Spieth, Max Homa, Chris Kirk, Akshay Bhatia, and Nick Taylor. So you can see quite a bit of overlap between your total par 4 performers and your success at the specific range here at Harbor Town. I wish I could highlight these 2 columns individually. I can't. But again, just look at the amount of success or correlation between your total par 4s and your 400, 450. So quite a bit there. Lastly, we'll move to par 5s, and then we're going to go to Microsoft Excel. But par 5 efficiencies, all 3 par 5s measure from 550 to 6. However, you see some of the par 5s will stretch even below 500 yards. So I'm not sure if we just want to focus on this range. I think it's just going to be the total par 5s. Let's take a look at 2022. par 5s. Now, Jordan Spieth played these very, very well. Most of your top 20, in fact, all of your top 20 played it very well except for JT Poston. Okay, sorting on it, yeah. Spieth led in par 5s, or co-led, and a lot of success here. You had a 3.3, a pretty high miscut though. You don't want to ignore that. Pretty high miscut. 3.3, a 3.3 is the highest here. And the miscut's quite a bit further down. So a slim advantage for the 550 to 6 last year. And then 2021, very quickly, par 5s. If we sort on it, a little bit less correlating than 2022 for sure. Your winner was still fairly high, but he more so took advantage of the 500 to 550. So you got a 4.1. Winner is much higher up there. 3.3. So par 4s are definitely the most important. Then the par 5s I think are a pretty clear second. And then the par 3s. I don't feel strongly enough that I should separate out one of the two lengths. So we're just going to look at par 5s. Your top par 5 performers this calendar year in the field this week: John Rahm, Patrick Cantlay, Wyndham Clark, Sung Jae, Scotty Scheffler, Justin Rose, Jordan Spieth, Tommy Fleetwood, Xander, and Tony Finau. All right, so there's a look at the metrics that we're probably going to be focusing on this week, and that will end up in my mixed condition model. Let's move to Microsoft Excel. We'll cover this very, very quickly as we covered it last night, but no harm in rehashing very quickly. Again, it's a little surprising to me, but we did take a look at off the tee. For the players that finish in the top 30, off the tee is more important than around the green, but for the players that finish in the top 10s, the 5s, and your winners, it's been the around the green. And again, just take a note that the around the green has gradually been gaining in importance the past 3 years or so, coinciding with off the tee becoming less important. So I still think around the tee, still think around the green is going to need to be factored in or be a part of the mixed condition model, but I still think, and it looks like off the tee probably should be too. And of course, approach and putting, your two highest, with approach being the more dominant of them. We saw that distance kind of had a little bit of some correlating success, and really 2022's was a decent little outlier. Now 2021, the top 11 or so were positive in driving distance. I don't think driving distance is going to really be a thing, but if we remove that outlier, distance becomes, that's the Valero, my apologies, 10% less important. So even removing the low outlier, it's still not equaling the full field course average. So I'm just not there with driving distance. Instead, I'm going to put all of my eggs in the greens and regulation basket. Might be a day late with the Easter pun there, but don't care, I'm going with it. I'm going to put a lot of emphasis into the greens here this week. Maybe good drives, but I think that's more so a factor of the greens as opposed to the fairways. You can see fairways have gotten less important through the years. So, going to be looking at greens. Scoring. Again, it looked like the more consistent performance was in the bogeys, but your upper echelon finishes were in the birdies gained, the higher raw numbers in birdies gained. And we looked at doubles. It wasn't really all that big of a factor, so I'm still not sure how I'm going to approach the scoring this week. Whether I do the birdies, whether I do the bogeys. I don't think it would be correct to leave them out. I think we should look at at least one of them. But we saw in 2022, or at least in the last two leaderboards, 2022 it was more birdies. 2021 it was more bogeys, so there was no consistency there. And they're both negative, not by a lot, but they're both negative in terms of importance against other full field courses. So maybe it does need to be removed in the mixed condition model and put that percentage in other metrics that we know are going to be more important, like the par fours, like the greens, like the proximity. Moving through par threes, fours, and fives. Par threes, I mean, again, 75 to 80% of your total par three scoring is in one range. So we're just going to be looking at 175 to 200. I do think it is justifiable to put 5% in here, even though the par threes really aren't all that important. This just makes up such a huge amount of the par threes that I think we could gain an edge on others by just focusing on who is good at this range for the par threes. There are still 4 of them after all. Par fours, pretty big numbers here. You see most important range, clearly the 400 to 450. Par fives, pretty evenly split between these two. I mean, yes, the 550 to 6 is slightly higher, but not all by much. So it looks like it's just going to be total par fives, and I mentioned it last night. I'll mention it again tonight. This is a very consistent performing metric, which as a statistical analyst I love. It's very consistent. And then lastly, the proximity. Yes, total prox will always have the biggest number, but when you look at, oh gosh, dang it. When you look at against other full field courses, 131% more important. So we're just going to be looking at 175 to 200 and who's good from that range. All right. Before we go to the early look file, let's take a look at my mixed condition model from last year. It's really bothering me that my camera won't focus. Technology. Okay. We see last year's mixed condition model, I would say, was pretty darn poor, all things being considered. Yes, my number one player did finish third. The winner was 34th in my rankings. There we go. Now it's focused for whatever reason. Jordan Spieth was 34th, so it's not terrible, but, I much prefer to have them be in the top 20, the winner be in the top 20. I had a fair share of very, very good performances mixed with 9 missed cuts. That is not a good percentage at all. I try to aim for about 4 to 5, 20 to 25% of your top 20 if they miss the cut. That's acceptable. It's golf. Anything can happen. But this was a pretty poor performing mixed condition model, at least in terms of pure results from last year. So let's see what I did. I had 15% strokes gained approach. That does seem rather logical. Pete Dye course, you're going to have to hit your irons well. 15% 175 to 200. That perhaps is a little bit heavy, but I still don't see any reason to have less than 10%. We just saw how important they are compared to other full field courses. So, okay. Now, 10% I'm getting back. Actually, 20% I'm getting back. I did look at strokes gained total on short courses. So I imagine we'll just be adding some short course filters to things. I did look at the wind. Apparently it was very windy last year. I don't remember. I've slept since then. But I did take a look at wind performance as well. I had 10% 175 to 200 par 3, so I did isolate just that range of par 3s. I think it's probably needing to be about 5%, but I did isolate that range of par 3s. 10% par 4 seems a little bit light. I would think this needs probably to be about 15% based on the metrics and the prior leaderboards that we've seen. I did split out 400, 450. In fact, I did do 5% off the tee. I don't remember doing that, but I did 5% off the tee. I had 5% in birdies gained on short courses. Okay. Again, I didn't do anything with scoring filters last year, so 5% in birdies gained. Perhaps it's birdies gained on Pete Dye. Perhaps it's birdies gained on short. Maybe you need to put some bogey avoidance here. I don't know. 5% in greens. I think this was a good metric needing to up the percentage. And 5% par 5s, I think we definitely need to up in percentage. Now, if we were to sort on last year's leaderboard, meaning, Jordan Spieth, this top line, and then Patrick Cantlay, Shane Lowry on down, I did this for the top 25, as that was just a nice, convenient number for the amount of players that were, in ties. Let's take a look at the predictability of these metrics, or how close they came to showing who was going to perform well. Anything in the mid 40s, 45 to about 47, 48 is okay, acceptable. If you're under 40, that is very predictable. That is one of the stalwart metrics. Anything above 50 starts to be pretty loose. So surprisingly, approach was not all that predictive last year. The worst, however, was proximity, which it kind of it seems to be consistent for me, at least, that proximity is consistently inconsistent. I don't feel like I ever narrowed down proximity correctly, but I still think it's 175 to 200 based on everything that we have seen from the prior leaderboards, from the data, but it wasn't very predictive last year. Now, strokes gained total short courses, was very predictive. It was the same as 400, 450 par 4s. Those were the two most predictive metrics and filters that we used last year. So definitely going to want to be looking at short course metrics anytime there's a question on whether I want to use a filter or not. It's probably going to be going on the short course, considering how predictive strokes gained total short courses were. The wind wasn't all that much. Par 3s really weren't all that much, but I can accept that. We're going to be backing that off to 5% this year. But I still am confident it's just the 175 to 200. Now, the par 4s were okay. Off the tee was pretty good, so clearly we're on the right track with off the tee. I still think around the green needs to come into this. The greens also. Remember the greens I looked at, this was 5% on short courses. Greens were fairly predictive as well. So some good metrics and filters, and some that were poor. So we'll see how this year's mixed condition model looks compared to last year's, but certainly there's no denying that there is a lot of room for improvement from last year's. All right, so now we'll move over to the early look file and the specific performance of players here at Harbor Town in the past 5 years. Before we do that, though, I will show you a little bit of my research, in the sense of that I think prior course form is going to be something we want to look at. So again, this is kind of like the what I call the winner matrix, is the performance specifically at Harbor Town leading up to the year that the player won. So, Stuart Sink wins in 2021. I did not gather his performance or his result from last year. I just care about what he did leading up to it. Something that really stands out, I want you to take a notice. Every single winner, and this was one of the criteria that I put forward on social media, every single winner that had played Harbor Town previously made the cut the last time they played it. Now, it didn't have to be the year prior. You see, Jordan Spieth skipped the RBC Heritage in 2021, but he did make the cut at least in 2020 and then wins in 2022. Stuart Sink made the cut in 2020 and then wins. And it doesn't have to be, a top 10 or a lot of success. You can see Spieth barely made the cut seemingly. Sink barely made the cut seemingly. But anybody who has played or who had played Harbor Town before they won made the cut the year or the event prior. The last time they played. Sorry, let me try to phrase this better. The last time a winner played Harbortown the year or before they won, they had made the cut. It didn't have to be the year prior, but the time before they won, they had made the cut at Harbortown. Now you do have three first-time winners in Satoshi Kodaira in 2018, Wesley Bryan in 2017. Oh yeah, it's just those two. Sorry, I keep thinking McDowell didn't play, but he did play in 2011. So 2 first-time winners. So you can't automatically write off any first-time starter, but of players who have played Harbortown, they generally like it or they don't. They generally have a modicum of success or they don't. And I'm going to tell you, Wesley Bryan was in fantastic form leading into his win, even though he had never played Harbortown. I think he was coming in off of something ridiculous like 3 straight top 10s. Now, Satoshi Kodaira, for all of my research today, has been a pretty true outlier. He's been kind of the exception to the rule on a lot of these things. But I did want to highlight this for your use throughout the week, that if a player has played Harbortown, they need to have shown the ability to make the cut the last time they played it. So with that, now we'll go to performance specifically at Harbortown. And I'm not going to remove anybody who's only played it once. I just want to get a feel for who has played or who has done the best at some of these metrics that we think are going to be the most important. So we are going to start with off the tee. It showed that it was very predictive last year, had some led to some modicum of success on the upper end of the leaderboard. So again, only one time, but Cameron Young. EVR, 2 for 2. Cam Davis, 2 for 2 here. Now, Matt Fitzpatrick, 4 for 5. Very, very good. Patrick Cantley, 3 for 4. Very good off the tee here. Colin Morikawa. Joel Damon. Lucas Glover, 4 for 5. JT Poston, 3 top 10s. He does have a missed cut, but 3 top 10s. Has been pretty good off the tee here. So all of these players, really, with the exception of maybe John Rahm, Cam Davis, and Cameron Champ, for obvious reasons, these guys aren't bigger hitters. Oh, sorry, Victor Hovland, but he's only played it once. So again, the guys that have played this tournament well, consistently, and have played it very well across those years, you don't need distance. Poston's never going to have a lot of distance. Webb Simpson, never going to have a lot of distance. Joel Damon's generally not going to have a lot of distance. So distance isn't really all that necessary here. We'll take a look at approach, as it is the most important shot type here at Harbortown. Your top iron players, your strokes gain approach players. Trey Mullinax only one time. Matthew Neesmith, 3 for 3. Colin Morikawa, 3 for 3. He's doing it all in the ball striking, which you would expect from Colin Morikawa. He just hadn't putt well here. JT, 2 for 2. Webb Simpson, your strokes gained total leader the past 5 years here. Very good with his irons. Luke List, only 3 for 5. Griot, 3 for 5, a little bit better or more success. Cantley, Sink, your 2021 champion. Shane Lowry's been very good here and is very good on Pete Dye courses in general. CT Pan, a former champion, I believe in 2019. So there's your top iron performers. As much as I'm going to be using around the green, I'm just going to kind of skip it tonight, running over on time. I do want to focus on some other stats. So let's see who's been the best putters here the past 5 years at Harbortown. Your top performing putters have been Seamus, only 1 year. Bezadenhout's been good. There's Matt Kuchar. Michael Thompson, 4 for 5. Maverick McNeely, 3 for 3. JT Poston again, 3 for 4. Brian Harmon. There's these guys that have been popping on the Poa Trivialis. Tommy Fleetwood's been pretty good here on the greens. Joel Damon 3 for 3. Harris English. Billy Horschel. These are technically Bermuda, although it's Poa Trivialis on the receipt, so anytime it's Bermuda, especially average speed Bermuda greens, you got to think about Billy Horschel. Denny McCarthy, just an all-world putter. I thought I had removed Alex Noren. We're going to save that. I really thought I removed him last night. Yeah, so there's your top putters. Shane Lowry, Terrell Hatton. I do want to look at some greens. Greens in regulation. We'll end off on some 3s, 4s, 5s in proximity. Greens. Where is my life right now? There it is. Greens in regulation. Your top greens gained. Matthew Neesmith again, 3 for 3. Colin Morikawa, 3 for 3. Cantley, Fitzpatrick. Corey Connors, only 3 for 5, but a decent amount of success. Joel Damon. Kevin Streelman's been pretty good, or fairly good here, I suppose. 3 for 5. Stuart Sink, Webb. Sepp Straka's been very good here. 3 for 3. Average finish of 32nd. Jordan Spieth, your defending champion, 3 for 3. Xander, 3 for 3. Much less in terms of inspiring finishes, but still 3 for 3. Andrew Landry, 4 for 4. Look at that. There's a name for you. Don't know if I would use Andrew Landry, but 4 for 4 here. Okay. Par 3s, 175 to 2. Justin Rose, Smalley only one time. Maverick McNeely, Doug Gim, Sepp Straka, Bezadenhout, Justin Thomas, Robert Trebb a little bit less so, Webb Simpson, Grillo, Neesmith, Harmon. But you're very quickly going into like the 1.2s, 1.1s. Again, only going to be 5% in this, so it's not going to be a huge factor, but something to make a note of. I'm only going to look at par 4s because we're running over on time, but we will scan across as well for the 400 to 450. So your top par 4s, Matt Kuchar, second in strokes gained total the past 5 years. There's Cantley, there's Poston, Joel Damon's been good here, Simpson, Doug Gim. John Rahm is 1 for 1. All right. Billy Horschel, 4 for 5. Michael Thompson, 4 for 5. C.T. Payne, a former champion, 4 for 5. Harmon, 4 for 5. And again, of your players that have played this very well, nobody negative in these 400 to 450 par 4s. So, again, just the added emphasis there. 2 more. We're going to look at par 5s, and we're going to look at proximity 175 to 2. So, par 5s. Players have played the par 5s the best here the past 5 years. Matt McNeely. There's Fitzpatrick again. Sam Burns has been pretty good at the par 5s here. Cam Davis, JT, they're only twice. Jordan Spieth, Sepp Straka, Shane Lowry. Wesley Bryan's a former champion, as we saw. Siwoo Kim, Troy Merritt, Neesmith. And then we're going to end off with the 175 to 200 proximities. Top performers there, Doug Gim. Only 2 for 2, but he has shown propensity to be good at the most important length here, or most important length of approach shot here. Homa just wants JT. Matthew Neesmith again, 3 for 3. Tommy Fleetwood's 2 for 3, but some stellar finishes. Patrick Cantley, Webb, Morikawa, Siwoo, a little bit less success, 3 for 5. Look at this. Russell Henley's only 1 for 4 here at Harbor Town. Very interesting to see that, considering he is a ball striker. But 3 for 4, or 1 for 4, excuse me. Grillo, Sepp Straka, EVR 2 for 2, but average finish inside the top 20. So there is a look at the top performers in some of the various metrics that we think are going to be the most important this week at Harbortown. I will bring you back to the beginning and sorted by average finish. That's going to do it for the Data Dive show tonight. Thank you, Joanne, for jumping in chat. Really appreciate it, and for tuning in and watching. Thanks to everybody else out there who tunes in and watches, supports the channel by liking the video, commenting, subscribing. I always appreciate it. I am getting pretty close to what I would consider the first milestone, getting close to 100 subscribers. So I'm hoping I get to that here fairly soon. But that would be all thanks to you all, that you all subscribe and support the channel and enjoy the content that I bring you. So I always appreciate it. For all of the wagers that you've made so far this week for the RBC Heritage, for all of the wagers you're thinking about making this week for the RBC Heritage, and until I see you Wednesday night for the DFS Tactics show, may all your bets be profitable.